As a Humanities Center Fellow, I am writing a book which deals with one of the most archaeologically and historically saturated regions in the world, largely an artifact of work that's been done on it, but also in the simple riches that are there. And the book is called Old Lands, a chorography of the Eastern Morea, otherwise known as the Peloponnese. Now, the geographic region of the Peloponnese encompasses the Corinthia from the Isthmus of Corinth, the Corinthia, Achaia up there in the north, Arcadia here, this kind of central area, Elis over to the west, Messenia here, Laconia here, and the Argolid down below. I've chosen the Byzantine epithet Morea because of the ambiguity of the term. Morea means basically is kind of a tree. It's a mulberry tree. And the region was renowned for mulberry production in the Byzantine period. It could be also reflect the shape of the actual Peloponnese, shaped like a mulberry leaf, however unlikely that may be. It may also reflect something of a kind of Slavic word, more, which derives from the Latin mare, sea. And all three of these kinds of associations have a kind of productive backing to my book project, my book that I'm writing here. Now, so the Eastern Morea, specifically where I'm writing, encompasses the Corinthia in the north and the Argolid here in the south. Before I tell you about the book, though, I'd like to allow me to explain kind of the problem that I'm addressing. And what you see here is a small church of Agios Yannis, which is really St. John. It's in Lefkaka, which is near Nafplion in Greece, and it's set in the northern edge of a low hill. It's a small church built in the midst of a square structure with polygonal masonry, you see here. It's an Orthodox church. It enjoys a local renown for its window, a journey through which 4 sick children is known to miraculously cure them of their ailments. But the church itself is a few hundred years, whereas the tower dates to the 4th century BC. So we have 2,400 years here enmeshed. And this tower was perhaps associated with the local community, protection of the local community, Sini. So following the lead of history, archaeologists tend to write long-term stories about regions that begin and trace the continuity of a human experience over the long term. So you have the Paleolithic, the Mesolithic, the Neolithic represented here at Franck Cave. You then move on to the Bronze Age, the Archaic, the Classical, present here at the site of Assini. We then would go through the intervening periods up to the birth of the modern Greek nation state, represented here at the Madrasa, which is in Nafplion, the first, it's an Ottoman Islamic school, but in the first capital of modern Greece. So, to get from this story of a former 4th century BC tower, perhaps associated with the defenses of Assini, to this small church of Agios Yannis, archaeologists often travel through 2,000 years of history and human continuity with the site to tell that story. And yet, irrespective of that temporal distance, along the line, within the fabric of the actual church, you see here, the Hellenistic and the Ottoman are clearly intermingled in the image. Incidentally, if you look off to the side, there are 4 TTU students who are experiencing this intermingling off to the right. So it's this story of intermingled times, whether it's for locals or for TTU students, that I want to tell in this book. So to get at this, the book, Old Lands, reworks and further develops a kind of old genre of descriptive writing. Let's call it that. Chorography. Now, chorography is not choreography. I'm not writing about dancing. I'm not writing about choreos. I'm writing about choros, without the E, land. So it's simply a big word with a deep and important history, choreography, that has nonetheless largely been neglected. So today, we scholars, for example, work within a knowledge economy that divides up the undividable. Because choreography is pre-disciplinary, it comes before the establishment and professionalization of many of the fields that study this region. It's a way to write without divisions, and I will return to this. My aims in writing the book are threefold. So first, Old Lands rework, it aims to provide what we might call an empirically rich. That is, it's full of stuff, right? And it talks about stuff that's around. And carefully detailed regional account that in following routes, roads, forgotten paths, grapples with neglected diversities, those which fall through the sieves of linear histories, which are nonetheless powerful. Second, Old Land seeks to draw insights from the material memories of human and non-human engagement with land and environment over the last 10,000 years and situate them in light of radical upheavals in regional space. So urban sprawl, highways, lowering water tables, and the ecological crises at the forefront of everyone's consciousness today. Global warming, biodiversity loss, pollution. And third, the project offers a new and distinctive alternative to documenting landscape and region within archaeology, anthropology, and cultural geography. I want to say a little bit more about my motivations in doing this. For the last 40 years, archaeologists working in what we might call interdisciplinary survey projects on Mediterranean regions have tended to focus on quite small areas. So let's say 8 square miles to around 20 square miles. And forgive me, I'm converting kilometers here. I had 2 miles quickly. With the aim is to generate these kind of long-term historical narratives. And incidentally, these projects involve archaeologists, geologists, biologists, anthropologists, and so forth. Now, while it has proved extremely fruitful in providing and revealing a range of archaeological objects, sites, and features and new information on land use, changing populations, and site interaction, it's the combination of, let's say, a delimited area with a tight period focus, which arranges things, the material passed into a series of boxes that are separate, they're ordered, they're stacked up. Along the way, each segment takes up a key theme, one carefully melded with detailed discussions of these features and materials and people and entities encountered along the way. So from Corinth to Cleone, segment 4, for example, races along the Morea. This is this new motorway that reduces and compresses all these old geographical distances and barriers that used to exist in moving from Corinth to Cleone. There's a radical compression of time. But of course, the argument is that this region is uncompressible in many ways. In contrast, segment 5 walks along a series of footpaths between Cleone and Nemea, engaging memories that lie in the margins of agricultural plots. Weeds. That segment talks a lot about weeds. There's a lot of wisdom that come from them. Segment 12 is a synkresis, or a comparison of kingship between Plutarch's Pyrrhus and the democratic polis, that is the Greek city-state of Argos, as it existed in 272 BCE. Segment 20 takes up differences in the definition of land and belonging between Mesolithic foragers and tenant farmers under Ottoman overlords. The difference between the invention of even making the notion of a property explicit in that relation to land and the estranged belonging that comes with being a tenant farmer. 22 discusses the olfactory burden of living with one's own excrement in a city where sewers or cesspits don't exist. Now seriously, we have to think about this because this is part of someone's everyday experience. These olfactory burdens condition their lives. Of course, they don't necessarily think about them in the same way we do because we have sewers and cesspits. Some segments cross over paths taken by the Turkish traveler Evli Çelebi in 1668, a very interesting Turkish traveler who's writing this kind of Ottoman travelogue, and juxtaposing him next to northern Western European antiquarians is extremely insightful as to radical differences in how people experience this landscape. Measured in the unpublished logbooks of William Martin Leake on the Ides of March 1806, he is creating the first planimetrically measured map of the interior of the Peloponnese in the midst of the French and the British at war. Or paced out by another artillery captain, Bernard Stephan. He's measuring Mycenae in the winter 1881-1882. All these segments of the book work towards this kind of multi-temporal picture of land and community, change and belonging, one that I hope will have a fresh humanistic appeal that is of interest to diverse audiences. Thank you. What motivates the discussion is what I encounter as I come along. So for example, when I'm looking south, there's a segment called Looking South, and I'm talking about Greek houses. And I'm talking about the experience of living in a Greek house, hesta, meaning hearth, and women within Greek houses, ancient Greek houses. Misogynistic is not quite the right word, more gynophobic are the ancient Greeks. So these are issues that I raised there. There are many examples where class and gender are kind of bubble up, whether it be Northern Europeans looking at the kind of Ottoman landscape or Ottomans themselves in their interaction with their tenants. It happens over and over again. Those differences arise out of that occasion in discussing them as I move along. That makes sense.
Yes. It's obvious that you are interacting with contemporary population, and you are kind of, getting their idea. And how do you mesh that experience with the inhabitants of the past? Because from then you have just, text.
Yep.
And in this case, you have this ethnology that is going on, that they know you. I mean, it's more an ethnologist than an archaeologist, so I'm curious about that.
Right. Well, I'm writing this as a chorographer rather than an archaeologist.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the anxiety with our authorship pervades the whole book. So some segments I write, some segments actually are written through interlocutors such as Gertrude Bell, who's traveling along the train in 1899. She's a very interesting person for all kinds of reasons that I can't get into now. Archaeology and history are radically different. Archaeology doesn't deal with the past, it deals with what becomes of the past. History deals with the past, that's a very different thing. Archaeologists deals with things and the memories they hold. History deals with people. Often people look at stone walls and they want to get at people, but you can't necessarily do that. The memories they hold may have nothing to do with people. They may have to do with microbes, they may have to do with animals, they may have to do with all kinds of transformations, earthquakes. So that anxiety between history and archaeology runs throughout the book. I try to pull out as many interlocutors as I can. Some segments take place with locals today. So they're actually discussing and flushing out the site with someone in conversation as we move. So there's conversational engagements as well. I try to, as much as I can, efface myself as an author, even though I'm calling attention to the fact how difficult that is to do, and aware of the fact I am writing this.
Who did it? Thank you.
Thank you. Bruno.
Yeah,
Bruce, sorry.
I mean, that's exactly what I was wondering about. This was we have a theme called epistemologies of the observer, and you're just in the pocket with that. But I was curious how you intend to mobilize the narration, just literally how you intend to voice the travelogues, the choreographic sequences.
I would give away my secret. I'm not sure why you have to buy the book to see it.
Well, give me a hint.
Well, every single segment is different. Some segments take place at, it's describing 272 BCE is told at 100 CE. Another one's in 1899, another one's in the 18th century. These are then melded with first-hand accounts that I take. In the beginning, they're temporal. As it goes on, I tend to drop time altogether, and I want to throw things out of time. And Angelica is is a woman who visits Mycenae. She's actually thrown out of time altogether. She's in the future, but she's experiencing Mycenae and shocking out this relationship between history and archaeology, which destroyed the site, by the way. History destroyed Mycenae. Archaeology, if it had stayed true to what it was, would have dealt something, given us a radically different site today. Those are the kinds of ways I'm trying to get it, but it's a long answer without much time.
Well, you have 36 seconds.
Did that get it, some of what you're talking about?
Well, so I know to expect a tour de force of voicing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Literature, creative writing, these are very important to me, and they must be my guides in how to do this. You all have been very good at this. Archaeologists need to rise to that challenge. History's been good at this. Archaeology is not. I'm writing an archaeological synthesis. There's a challenge to history. For me, archaeology has equal scope.